morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the Blowback Roundtable. We have all of our regular hosts who don't need any introduction. So I don't even know if I should give an introduction. Everybody knows Ben, Carlo, and Ian. Thank you guys for joining me very much. We are expecting Leo. We did get off to a late start this morning. Leo is also running late. He'll probably pop in any second. Title of our program this morning, Mahatma, Kuleba, and Other Fantasies. So I'm going to leave that to Ben to explain the meaning of our title and how it what it refers to.
Before I actually explain it, we can go into it. I think maybe it's best that we all watch a little clip that groveling Kuleba did just before going to New Delhi to meet his Indian counterpart, which is Jai Shankar. Check this out.
According to Gandhi, the future depends on what we do in the present. Hence, supporting Ukraine today means supporting freedom and independence, supporting the legacy of the great Mahatma. I believe we can lay a solid foundation for the future of our mutually beneficial relations. Dear Indian friends, I look forward to seeing you this week in New Delhi.
Well, that's from the very man in preparation. So he arrived there and all the headlines were, we're going to gather support, maybe force Russia to remove its troops. But it turns out everything was about the Zelensky peace formula and the upcoming, peace summit somewhere in Switzerland. And by his words, he said, India can play a very important role in bringing together more nations from the global south. If India sits at the table of the peace formula, then many other nations will feel safe and comfortable sitting next to it and come to join this effort. That was the preparation. I mean, this is us a year after, what was that guy, Danilov, insulted Russia and China for being less developed and less human. You know, they haven't had any diplomatic contact for a year. And Jai Shankar, who I wouldn't like if I were Chinese, but I still kind of like him, like honestly and tritely told him, that's coming from the Indian press, that, yeah, we're good at mediation. We can pass on, messages on Gaza and Ukraine between people. We're good at that, but, you know, we're not going to do that, basically. The same as China. That's kind of the Mahatma Kuleba story.
Are we just supposed to accept that Gandhi's axiom was true and that what we do in the present influences the future? Like, is that even true?
You don't understand. It's all about Gandhi was fighting for Ukraine. There's also irrefutable evidence, according to Ukrainian side, that Jesus was Ukrainian.
Jesus, yes.
Yes, you've seen that probably.
But why does he think it's necessary to cite an authority to assert that what we do in the present affects the future?
It's groveling to
I know, no, I get it. Yeah. But it just seems kind of an obvious thing. You don't really need to cite an authority to convince people that that's true. Yeah.
And the quote's a commonplace. It's not particularly profound.
Yeah, he didn't do a lot of Googling, did he, to come up with that one? Not a lot of research by this guy.
What about China in the geopolitical? No, India. What about India in the geopolitical context makes them important? Like, why is India an important player in the situation?
Well, as Jai Shankar said, they remained neutral on Ukraine. Not really on China, but on Ukraine they remain neutral. Therefore, it's a viable voice that, as he said, the global South can connect with. But yeah, basically, come on, please help us out. There's a lot of panic in Ukraine going on at the moment, and this was one last-ditch effort. By the way, we already have a response from Mistress Zakharova saying this is pure alchemy. We're not going to sit at the table about the Zelensky peace plan because it's pure alchemy. So it's shot down. The whole effort is shot down the next day.
Ian, what's your analysis of India and the importance of India? And I mean, they are neutral. The West would love for them to, join their anti-Russian alliance. Is that plausible?
Well, who knows? I mean, India, I don't really know enough about India to say that. I mean, India does like like Spanish Fives just commented, there has been a lot of, pro-Russia commenters spent a lot of time and effort saying, "Oh, look how pro-Russia India is." Well, not really. I mean, it was very gracious of India to buy Russian oil at a discount. So that I don't know if that's a great act of generosity. And India is on board with the whole because they have that decades-old border feud with China, and India has lost a couple border disputes with China also, each time in kind of an embarrassing fashion. And unfortunately, as China increases its power militarily, each border feud is more embarrassing than the previous one as the power gap increases between India and China. So maybe I think what you said earlier is probably the most correct take. This is just kind of a drowning man, Ukraine grabbing at whatever straw they can and hoping that India plays along. But there's no reason for India. I mean, why would they? It's not really.
They have a good relationship with Russia, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like with Napoleon and Napoleon's continental system. He was trying to get Russia to get, in this case, it was a kind of reverse. It was France trying to get Russia on board with their continental system, but ultimately the Tsar refused because at the time, England was a much bigger trading partner than France was. So there was just no reason for Russia at the time to switch sides. That's kind of the problem Ukraine is having. I mean, what can Ukraine or even Ukraine's sponsors offer India right now that they're not getting from Russia? Because switching sides, and of course there'd be an expectation, I think, of India's forcefully switch sides like that. It would come with a lot of ramifications. It would come also with military ramifications because let's say India sent some military help. I mean, they're leaning very heavily on Russia for those T-90s and those whatever else they're getting.
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be a very, very big consequential shift. And at this point, the problem is I think we're so late game with Ukraine. Maybe that was something they could convince people to do back in 2022, 2 years ago. But now it's just so obvious it's late game, and who knows?
Everybody wants to be on the side of the winner, and so right now India would have no interest in jumping on the side of the loser, just like Turkey. These they play both sides, but once they see that there's a winner, I mean, that's where they're going to go. So I can't imagine India would take the bait and start joining the West, sanctioning Russia, and all the things that I'm sure Kuleba was asking them to do.
True. I mean, one of the headlines.
Carlo, any thoughts about India and their geostrategic situation and importance?
Actually, no, I don't.
Not that interesting, but
I see Leo trying to get his technical.
There
he's
seems
trying
to be
join us.
webcam.
But he's having some technical issues. Hopefully, he'll be able to figure those out and join us soon. But any other thoughts? You were going to take us somewhere else, Ben, before I got everybody.
But the last thought was they have excellent diplomatic relations, India and Russia. And one of the headlines from the Financial Times of London, obviously the Brits, was that you have to basically, paraphrasing, let go of the Soviet legacy of your friendship. Good fucking luck with trying to do that. I mean, it's still the divide et impere, trying to divide and conquer. Don't know where it's coming from, but Ian's drowning man is very apt. I think it is so late in the game that I want to show you something that this is. Do you know United 24 Media? I'll actually show you who they are first. This is United 24 Media, the official fundraising platform of Ukraine. They have like 600 million already fundraised. They have Dark Jedi, Mark Hamill on board. And this is also the outlet that tiny little Bono likes to draw portraits of Zelensky for. And this was their tweet today, which also comes from Kuleba, who's being like rude. From a diplomat, these words were very rude. There's a lot of demands being made because Ukraine, and this is where I think Ian has more information, is being smashed by assaults. Like for the fourth day in the row, completely de-energized. I mean, Kharkov is dark. It's just a really, really bad situation. And a lot of the media is basically these outcries of desperation. And I think this Kuleba, stunt was just one of them. Someone please help us out. We don't know what to do. We can't give up. But what else? What else is there?
Well, I think what I've noticed in the media coverage is that the U.S. Kerfuffle on getting more aid to Ukraine, which was just recently partially fixed by the defense authorization
passing the budget,
bill.
yeah.
Right. So I mean, it
800
was portrayed
billion?
yes, but there is funding, and I think that's going to refill the coffers for discretionary budgets. But at the same time, there was a Politico article I saw a couple of days ago saying that there's one particular 300 million that was cleared to be sent to Ukraine, but had already been spent on Ukraine. So I think the way the media was portraying the hiccup in American aid is just not true. American aid did not stop. They did not just say, "Oh, sorry, we're not sending you any more shells." The Patriots were still firing, all the howitzers were still firing. There was not. I don't think there's any interruption in at least military aid to Ukraine. It's just the problem is that after that offensive, because they had been fasting on shells for a good half a year or longer leading up to that offensive, just so they could have the offensive. But now all those stockpiles are gone, and they're back to having to ration shells again. And the problem is that meanwhile, Russia's production has increased. I mean, Ukraine's production has also increased, but not by nearly enough, and to cover what they're getting externally. So it's not that they're not getting help; it's just the help is not enough. That's the problem.
Do you remember maybe a month ago when France had problems with it's not gunpowder, maybe black powder, which is used in the production of shells, and we don't know where to get it. Now the US is running to Turkey for it in order to increase shell production. So it really is. Its maximum capacity is not enough. There's a lot to that story, I think.
Looks
and
like
Leo seems to.
Here he is. Here he is. Yes.
Always well dressed in Berlin. How are you doing, Leo?
Yes.
Good. Yeah. It's cold again.
Some technical difficulties. I'm glad you worked those out, Leo. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We are on the topic of Ukraine. Our show was titled Mahatma, Kuleba, and Other Fantasies, because Kuleba was just in India, asking for help. And we're all in agreement that India, maybe could have been enticed to help Ukraine if Ukraine was winning. If it was obvious Russia was going down, India would jump right on that bandwagon. But since the opposite is true, we don't think that diplomatic mission is going to bear any fruit. You agree with that, probably?
Yeah, India is definitely being opportunist in this game so far. They have really no agenda, really, other than for the ruling class of India to keep ruling on this nationalist ticket.
Yeah,
quite right. Billy Bob compared it to, a larger game, but like the whirling dervish, Erdogan's game. Similar.
Also,
as in opportunistic, yes.
Right. I don't get the whirling dervish reference, though.
Spins around. You can't see it stop. You don't know which direction it's facing until it stops, but it never stops. East, west, Right. Yeah, only because I think of the dervishes with a fondness because of Sufism. But anyway, go on. Sorry. Yeah, it's cool. But on the topic, the divide and conquer, I think Mark Rutte, who is now poised to be the NATO chief because that Baltic bitch, Kaja Kallas dropped out of that race. He approached China to please put pressure on Russia to stop. Well, Kuleba approached India to please put pressure on Russia to stop. Well, Russia's not stopping. And that US aid that we mentioned, that 60 billion, still stuck. I think Zelensky beamed himself into Congress, not into Congress, but to talk with Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, all ready to beg and convey to him the urgentness of the situation. And that guy had this to say, this is just 30 seconds of an
Last
interview.
month, you said, if we have American support, we will win. If we don't have American support, we will lose. It's true. Simple as that. Ukraine will lose.
But it's not. But it's not simple. President Zelensky said if Ukraine were to lose, Putin would be on NATO's doorstep. He said while he's grateful for U.S. support, with Russia on the attack, he says what's needed most here is the Patriot defense systems.
Yes, with the 100% interception rate, which is being hunted. So yeah, it's a tough spot.
Those
Sorry, I
arms
don't know how to-
manufacturers really, really want to get that contract, but they want a guaranteed contract. You know, they're not going to make, you know, missiles and systems until they have a guarantee from Congress that they're going to get paid. And they don't want to, you know, increase production and then find out that, you know, the U.S. government is going to negotiate some kind of a peace.
Yeah,
Then
or the EU.
They'll be out some cash.
It's an idiotic statement. Russia's already on NATO's doorstep.
Yeah.
Finland, the
No,
Baltics.
the mainstream media is idiotic.
Yes.
Like, you can't listen to
Good
them.
Lord. How illiterate do you have to be to swallow that crap?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of funny that on one hand they're saying, well, it's if they win in Ukraine, there'll be more on NATO's doorstep. But if they stop attacking Ukraine, we need to let Ukraine into NATO. So it's like no matter.
Right. It's just, where is that doorstep going to be? Is there going to be a buffer zone, or is there not going to be a buffer zone between Russia and NATO?
And so much of the imperialist narrative just hinges on this very basic, like, us versus them thing, and like this basic perspective, like, you know, when two children have a fight in the kindergarten. Billy, you have children, you know about this. When there's a fight between kids in their school, in their high school or whatever, there's always two sides, right? Like, as adults, you step in, like, you don't assume just because one person is angry, maybe one party is crying, right? The crying party is not always necessarily the one that is, you know, morally correct. And the one who seems aggressive at that moment, you know, it may not be the evil, the bad kid.
I like that.
Right. And all of these things have a history, right? And if we only look at how the West has excised, has cut off the other side of the narrative, right? Like, not allowed, forbidden, verboten completely to look at the conflict from the other side. Like, there is no other side. That is their entire thing. There is no other side. Like, just from that fact alone, we can see which side is actually bad. It's the side that is silencing the other side, that is pretending that there's only one side to the story. And how we look at the borders, right? Like, NATO being on Russia's doorstep, or Russia being on NATO's doorstep. Like, it's
who's sneaking where? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And European citizens and like American citizens and the Western citizens are not allowed to consider the other perspective.
That's one of the reasons on our continent in Europe. I don't know if the US has the same, but the first casualties were RT and Sputnik. You still can't reach those official websites. You can't see that side. Yeah.
So you're just kind of describing the strategy that the establishment press uses to maintain public opinion, to to manufacture public opinion, and it's insidious, but that's absolutely what they do. You know, it's through censorship and just a dumbing down and just not an actual explanation. You know, that's why they exist. They don't exist to inform people or to explain to people what's going on. They exist to indoctrinate and to manufacture opinions. This idea, like you said, that he's presenting this. It's just two sides. That's all you got to know. It's us against them, and we're us. So we're on our side. That's it. I mean, that's all you need to know. It's two sides, us against them. Whose side are you on? Us or theirs? You're on our side because you're us. I mean, it's really
the invaders, the war criminals, the orcs.
Mm-hmm. It's absolutely worthless. It's worse than worthless. I wish it was just worthless, but it's detrimental because people just passively absorb that ignorance and confusion, and then we get what I get on social media every fucking day on social media with these stupid motherfuckers. So what about
So am I, Usher.
The biggest thing to me the last couple of days was seeing Zelensky making these statements like, we're gonna lose, and we need help. We're running out of shells. He's really, for the first time, it seems, acknowledging that things are looking dire. And I'm not referencing that clip. I'm referencing things I've read on Telegram, which never
there was the
lied.
big CBS interview, and I think, and there's snippets of it coming out today. I think that's what you're talking about. We're almost out of artillery shells. The situation's dire. We need aid. That sort of stuff. Yeah. I think the previous one was a clip from that. Well, talking about, I mean, just look at the body language. I don't know what's going on here. Has he turned into Biden or something? But it doesn't look like he knows what he's doing here. Check this out. It's just 20 seconds.
Концепція кругової оборони міста Сум, яка включає в себе побудовуючи згодно-опорні пункти. Що собою являє згодно-опорний пункт? Додатково в нас передбачені окопи для місця ведення вогню для БМП.
You know, he's just looking around like, what's going on here? He was taken. This is in Sumy Oblast, where apparently is part of the fortifications. They're building 2,000 kilometers. I thought the contact line was 1,000 kilometers, but that's what Ukrainian media tells us. You know, to the extent that the who was that guy? That the Surovikin line was built like under 9 months or something like that. It just doesn't look like a very secure individual. You know.
Well, I think he's just kind of in acting mode. I mean, he's going back to what he does best, is acting. And I wouldn't say he didn't look that engaged in the environment, but he was posing. You know, he was doing that tough guy. I'm here in my camo outfits.
But you set up that clip a little bit too much, because I was disappointed. I was expecting him to fall down because of your introduction, Ben.
No, sorry, he was just looking around. What am I? Who's this guy? Why am I here?
Yeah. Are you Corn Pop?
It was a Biden sort of thing. It's just not going good.
Yeah, he looked confused, like he didn't have his normal director there to, tell him his motivation. He definitely wasn't, projecting confidence and a knowledgeable warrior that is familiar with trench warfare and how these trenches are going to protect the soldiers from the fab. What are they making now? 3,500s, or they're making some real big fab.
Big boys, 3.5 tons. Is that the big one? What do you call it? Shoigu went to visit that factory. It's like lying down. It's as tall as Shoigu, that fucking thing. And there's no defense.
They're firing them from the MLRS trucks. I think can fire these guided bombs now, so they don't even need to launch them from planes. That's like some updated Russian tech. But Ian, are you familiar with that, or am I getting ahead of things?
What's the biggest fab boy?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know what the biggest one is now. I mean, the big thing is that it's makes it special. It's their equivalent of a JDAM. It's a kit that makes these dumb munitions guided and accurate. So
longer range.
True, yeah. You put a pair of wings on it, it's longer range, and it's very, very precise. Those are the kits. Do you know David Axe? He writes for Forbes and the Telegraph. He's the tank man, military guy. He's done a bunch of copium, but also a bunch of the other side. Very well played, because he just came out that maybe the British Challenger 2 tank is not the right gear for Ukraine. That was today. Because, I mean, a month ago, he said he would just plow through the defenses. And now he says, well, it's too heavy. It's very hard to repair and all that shit. But he also called the fab bombs. It wasn't the exact wonder weapons, but game changers. He called them game changers in, I think, yesterday's Forbes magazine. Terrifying reality, those things.
Well, those 500s are bad enough, and then I think they had even up to 2,000, and now I think it was 3,500, which, I mean, man, it induces shell shock, and it's just a real big boom that nobody wants to be around. And it's you're not putting any Russian troops at risk when you drop those on trenches and things. The media is spinning this narrative. I mean, they seem to be more and more honest about how, it's going to be impossible for Ukraine to maintain, and that they're talking about a big invasion in May, right? May was, which is about in a month.
Zelensky was, yeah, May or June, I think he
Onto
said.
Kharkov.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
I saw the news, the chatter about that Russia's allegedly using their spring conscription to mask a second mobilization for troops to open up a front in the Kharkov region. I don't see any evidence for that. I mean, it's like saying, I mean, it's one of those statements that's in general true that yes, you know, in the spring they could launch an attack, but they didn't present any evidence for that.
Okay.
I don't think anyone who's repeating that story actually knows whether it's true or not. It's just like how year after year after year they're saying, "Oh, Russia's going to invade somewhere." You know, they just said that every year until it was.
It could be to put pressure on the West to provide aid, right? I mean,
yes,
that could be a
hysteria, is what it is.
I have a quick quote already, like preempting or copium or trying to scare. I don't know what it is, but this is Siersky, the current commander of the armed forces of Ukraine, and this is from the New Voice of Ukraine, wonderful copium magazine. And Kharkov or Kharkiv will become a fatal city for the Russian occupiers if they decide to attack it. That was coming from him. So please don't is what I get from that. But that's what they're expecting, or their military intelligence is expecting. Isn't it lovely that it was Budanov and the GUR who said we're the terrorists, and then the actual intelligence service, like this guy who has been arrested in absentia in a Russian court. I don't know what his name was. It's escaping me now. But yeah, he said we do civilian attacks on Russia, like going all in with this. I don't know. It's like a gambling thing. I've lost so much, and this is the last hand I can play.
I have a question then that builds on that a little bit.
Go.
Did the Crocus City Hall massacre, has that? There's been a lot of talk of forcing the Russians out of their mode of combat, the attrition. Did the Crocus City Hall massacre, has that to your mind, anybody, contributed to this new offensive by the Russians, especially with high-powered missiles? And is it a way of forcing the Russians out of their pocket, out of their strong, you know, the strong attrition dimension that they brought to the conflict? Anybody? I mean, want to comment?
I have a thought, but Ian's the military expert, I think.
Well, there's two sides to that. So on one hand, from a military standpoint, it could be a way to put pressure on Russia to resolve the war in Ukraine one way or the other quickly, because they see it as just it's going to be this hotbed of terrorism that's continually shelling the border regions, that's sponsoring and supporting terror attacks on Russian soil, and is going to continue to do that until the war is resolved. So that could be a way, like Carlo was suggesting, to put pressure on, to pressure them to act more forcefully on Ukraine. So that's one aspect to it. The other aspect is the same way the Chechen terrorists were used
when they were losing.
To create to create these ethnic tensions in Russia and exacerbate ethnic tensions. So I don't think it's really going to succeed on either front. So, I mean, it's true there were a lot of people in Russia unhappy, I mean, for good reason, unhappy about the attack, especially because all four people in the country were violating immigration laws. One of them, I think, if I remember correctly, one of them had an expired visa. All four of them had failed to update their register, because you in Russia, especially as an immigrant, you are supposed to register your address and keep the authorities notified where you live, what you're doing, and it's quite a bit. So I think they are going to respond by tightening immigration laws, tightening border controls. But I think as far as successfully creating this far right ethno-nationalist hysteria, I think that was the goal. I don't think that's going to succeed. The days of that succeeding.
And what about the strike packages that Carlo asked about?
Well, so some of them might. I mean, there's really no way, because Russia keeps their cards pretty close to the chest, and sometimes they'll say something as retaliation And I'll be like, well, was that really retaliation, or is it something you were planning to do anyway? So it's like a lot of those, like the strike on the SBU headquarters. I mean, it could have just been stuff they'd been planning to do anyway, and they had been doing intelligence gathering for weeks, and it just that's when they happened to do it. So it's really hard to say.
Yeah, I think of all the militaries in the world, Russia is probably really good at not being goaded, not being provoked into irrational, rash, impulsive, emotional decision making.
Thanks in large part to Vladimir Putin. Yes, I think Medvedev would have flattened Kiev by now, but yes.
And on the other side of the possible goal for this horrible terror attack to sow ethnic division within the Russian Federation itself, did you guys see the statement made by Putin? I was quite impressed. I'm just going to read a little bit of it.
Yes, please. I know which one.
Russia for Russians slogans are alarming, says Putin. He said some 190 ethnic groups representing all religious denominations live in the country, the president noted, and that nationalist ideas are concerning for a multicultural country like Russia. He said the slogan Russia for Russians promotes the idea that the ethnic majority deserves more rights than other nationalities in the country, and that the violation of the rights of any citizens will only lead to collapse of the country. Putin had warned. But anyway, yeah, it goes on. But anyway, he's
I think
definitely
one of the final thoughts
this head on.
Thoughts in that statement was that the unity of Russia is its strength. I really like that part. But yeah, that's the Navalny part he had there, didn't
press?
Hmm?
Did you read that in the Western press, Leo, or did you have to go to Sputnik or TASS?
I don't remember.
Because I haven't heard that. I haven't seen that. I think that is a great thing to say. And I mean, I think I am glad to hear Putin say that. But I just haven't seen it anywhere. So that's the first time I'm hearing it. So,
I saw it on RT.
Thank you for sharing that with us. That's a great, great sentiment. And it's absolutely true, because that's the whole point of, Western psychological operations, their media propaganda apparatus, these terrorist attacks. It's to divide the society. It's to get, part of the society in opposition to the government. And so you just have to, maintain unity and, between the different demographics, between the Christians, the non-Christians, the different cultures and different ideologies, the communists. And that's what Putin really excels at is, managing all these different, people. But unity is absolutely key. And so I'm glad he made a point of that. And I would be surprised if you read that in the Western press. That's why I asked. But
yeah. By the way, on that very point, one of the first things I saw, I'm afraid I don't have a clip of that, was Ramzan Kadyrov coming up against these terrorist threats and don't let them divide us. And today, I think in RIA Novosti, I read that Patriarch Kirill, the head of the Russian Orthodox, the Russian Pope, said that it's ethnic hatred is not acceptable in Russia. So pretty much all the major heads are saying the same as Vladimir Putin.
I'd say, but to follow up on that question on retaliation for the attack. So, I mean, just the sentiment, even the official sentiment from the beginning was, we know who carried out the attack. The question is who ordered it. So, I mean, at this early stage, they're still investigating it, and it might be days or weeks before they have a satisfactory answer. And that's, I think, I think the big decision is the Ukraine. I mean, I think it's known that, the US and UK intelligence communities, as they call themselves, had a hand in it. The question is, how much of a role did Ukraine play? Because up to this point, they have not, decapitated Ukraine. They have not targeted their government and political institutions. And we understand why, because if you collapse Ukraine's government with shock and awe, like we did in Iraq or Libya, it just becomes a failed state, which does not bring stability, which does not secure Russia's borders. But they might decide, if it is just a terrorist state that carries out terrorist attacks and there's no benefits to keeping that government in power, they might just decide to decapitate it. That is a possible outcome of actually striking the Duma, possibly striking Zelensky himself, striking all of those organs, which they have not done at this point. But that's a possible outcome of this.
Yeah, that would be the kind of thing that maybe you're hoping, a lashing out and a changing one's strategy from the effective war of attrition that is winning, and that's kind of what maybe was one of the possible, points of the terrorist attack was to get Russia to do something like that. And, would that have been, so I think that doing something like that, I think, is an escalation, and then it could, lead to, uncertain outcomes. Whereas the war of attrition, there's a certain outcome. And so I think Putin's good to just stick with the certain outcome that that's going on. But
well, not necessarily, because there is, they are trying to repeat those attacks. They've been several foiled attacks since then. So they might be aligned too far. We don't know what those red lines are that's keeping Ukraine from being decapitated. They might decide to do it. What they can also do is force the USA to make a choice of denouncing Ukraine and cutting ties with Ukraine, or going all in and saying we support Ukraine, even though it's obvious they did this terrorist attack. They could force US hands on that as well. So there's several different steps they could take, not necessarily in one order either.
Yeah, that's the major point. There's been some developments in the Crocus massacre case. Obviously, the Bortnikov, the FSB head, already released that there's financial data, as in cell phone data numbers of money strings connected to Ukraine, including crypto wallets, which is, a way of hiding who's really behind it. And Lavrov had this big interview in RIA Novosti, and he said, Ukraine, we know, is just the tip of the iceberg, and we have to drill deeper. Basically, they know it's just the weapon yielded against us, and we want to find the real culprits behind it. On that, I think it was an Al Jazeera, and I'd never read this before, from a friend of Judge Napolitano's show, Alistair Crook, the British diplomat, gentleman. And he had this, I can't remember the title, it's not in the cheat sheet, but he ran down that maybe, as in MI6 and CIA, maybe the Western intelligence services have lost control of what Ukraine does. And that is why they're trying to absolutely pin this on ISIS and try to distance themselves as much as possible. And that's what's given them away. Because, within an hour, there was that statement that Ukraine is not connected to this. It's all ISIS-K. And I thought that was really an interesting possibility. No evidence at this point, but.
Well, to go off at that point, the FSB made about the financial ties, that's something I said actually on the first night or the day after the attack happened, that financial paper trail.
That's the trail.
And not only that, but that is the U.S., maybe not within Russia itself, in other certain countries like Iran, but most of the world, the U.S. has a very tight surveillance state on even small payments. So, if you're sitting there, I'm going to plan a terrorist attack, and you pay, 10, 12 different people to help me out with it. That's those little suspicious transactions that the U.S. has the infrastructure to detect. So even if the USA, if no one in the USA actually ordered the attack, they knew about it and they knew.
Plausible deniability, they'd say.
Well, it's not even plausible. I wouldn't even say it's plausible deniability. If the FSB at this point says, hey, we know it was these Ukrainian affiliated crypto wallets that were involved in this, that means the US knew even before the attack happened and did not share that information. Yeah, so it's a very serious. And I was wondering about that because, I read all the news. I didn't see even one author or one commentator, anybody, bring up the financial ties. And that was, so I'm kind of glad the FSB said, hey, they were the ones who tracked the breadcrumbs, because that's definitely going to implicate not just Ukraine, but the USA as well. Because just by monitoring, that's something the USA would know.
Are you speaking from personal experience, Ian? Are you speaking from personal experience? Spanish Fobs is suggesting you have personal knowledge.
Yes, actually. The day after the business day on Monday, actually, Buy Me a Coffee, which is the donation plugin I have for my website, kicked me off because they traced me, which is and that kind of just, I think she brought it up because that just kind of shows how not even just the U.S. government, just banks have and other institutions have a pretty astonishing amount of power to track your day-to-day business just automatically with algorithms. So it's the financial breadcrumbs I think that are gonna show who's responsible for this tech and prove that the U.S. knew about it, even if it didn't order it, even if there isn't proof that it ordered it.
And we will see what happens next. Go ahead, Carlos. Sorry.
Scott Ritter has gone all in, and he agrees with me, and he says that Ukraine would not do anything without the U.S. giving its go-ahead, being behind it, and MI6 too. I agree with that. I mean, I'll go out on a limb because so many times in my pathetically long life that I've encountered a lot of pushback on theories or conspiracy theories I've had that have turned out that I was right. Now, the problem with that is people go on with their lives and they forget. They don't know that I was correct. They don't know that they were incorrect. They will come to me and go, "Wow, did you hear? Did you know about the fact that they invaded Iraq and Iraq wasn't involved and didn't have connections to fundamentalist groups because Saddam Hussein was Sunni and the fundamentalists are Shiite? Did you know that?" And it's like 10 years later, and I go, "Yeah, I told you that 10 years ago." So I really think that Scott's right on the money with this.
To be an American and think this wasn't them, you have to forget that the CNN did this massive expose on how the CIA built the GUR, the Military Intelligence Service. Well, how long ago was that? Months we're talking. I guess you have to forget that somehow.
Yeah.
So speaking of forgetting things, and I have a few things I want to say, and I'm sure other people want to get into. Leo, you probably have some things to say, but forgetting things. The Independent in 2019 quoted somebody in an article saying hundreds of ISIS members were going to Ukraine. That was in 2019. You brought up Scott Ritter, Carlo, and I like his analysis. I mean, I think he actually said Vicki Newland was responsible for greenlighting that terrorist attack, and it was related to why she's no longer there. So, I mean, that's to me. I mean, I'm not gonna say that's 100%, but I do like Scott. I like his speculation, and it's interesting. I mean, maybe there's some truth there.
Nasty surprises. Pepe Escobar agrees with you. So does Ray McGovern, and the other CIA guy I always kind of forget. He's lovely. Sonar 21.
So, Leo, you probably had things to say, and I probably beat you to the punch.
Well, I always have these kind of bird's eye view things. I mean, to say about the bigger picture, or like in a more abstract sense. These days, just increasingly, I find
Larry Johnson.
My inner Trotsky trying to break out of the little box to which he has been confined. Not Trotskyist, the Trotsky, the war general.
Okay, lock him back up, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, he's still in there, but he's threatening to break out. You guys were talking about decapitation strikes on Ukraine, the heads of the Ukrainian government. Lately I've been just looking at the situation, everywhere at the axis of resistance in West Asia, looking at China and the provocations in Taiwan, and looking at Eastern Europe, of course, right? And looking at Africa, the drone base in Niger and the forces there, the Wagner, stationed in West Africa, assisting with the independence decolonial movement. Just looking at all of this, just like a small part of me, my inner Trotsky, just thinks that all of them should coordinate and strike and deal a final decisive blow to the fucking empire, like once and for all, so that, I mean, these horrors will multiply, or they have very much the possibility or even probability of multiplying and getting like even worse for all these different populations. And like a decisive strike, maybe now is the time, or maybe in 3 months, or maybe in 6 months. I don't know about the particular numbers and everything, but it just seems like we're almost getting to that point where just like looking at everything, it just feels like maybe the time is is close for something like that. Would be a good idea if Trotsky was in charge.
Good thing you locked him back up. Yeah.
And one other aspect of Ukraine that I find intriguing is the F-16 question. And my understanding is that the Russians have taken out the extended and improved airstrip and the facility around it with missiles, which I don't know how that's going to affect their plan, the West's plan with the F-16s. They claim that they've trained Ukrainians to fly them, but I think Brian Berletic has made it perfectly clear the shortcomings of that. Any comments on that, guys?
Well, there's a recent Putin statement saying, well, we're just going to destroy all of them and any airstrip they take off from, including NATO countries' airstrips, because I think the harebrained NATO scheme is we'll send them from Romania, we'll send them from Poland, and it'll be fine because Russia won't engage. But it's been made very clear that this plan is going to meet the brick wall. So, yeah, it's a very stupid thing, but all it takes is one gravity-assisted nuke. Because that's how Russia is going to treat every F-16, because it's capable of carrying that, and then we're in some trouble,
Well, go ahead, Billy.
Well, I wanted to respond to Leo's comment, but my brain works so slow, and so it took you to talk before I was really ready to formulate it. But does anybody else want to go somewhere before I nail Leo? No.
Take the soapbox, Billy Bob.
Well, no, I just had a few. So Russia was put in a spot, right? Russia had two choices. They could either resist or they could surrender and allow NATO, right on their borders and nukes to be stationed, within 3 minutes flight time of Moscow. So they had a choice to violently resist and the risk that comes with that, or to just surrender and deal with the risk that comes with that. Well, they chose to resist, and they're no longer afraid of resisting. They're actively engaged in resistance. Now the ball is back in the court of the West. So now it's the West's choice. What are we going to do? Because we're going to lose this war we initiated with Russia. Are we going to escalate? So Macron has decisions to make. The United States has decisions to make. And right now, Russia is just going to continue doing what they're doing. And the ball is in the court of the West. What are they going to do? And I think this is how the resistance to imperialism wants things to go. They don't want to escalate. They're going to respond as necessary to the provocations, but they're going to respond in a way that is not itself escalatory. And so, they're going to put the moral, World War III morally is going to be the fault of the West. China is not going to initiate it because they're opportunistic and they think, hey, if we do this, we can knock them out once and for all. And I mean, and I think that's the difference between Trotskyists and, real communists. I mean, we're about, defeating imperialism, but with the least kind of destruction, the least kind of loss of life, the least kind of wider war possible. We want to, and we don't want to have the moral responsibility for initiating it, right? We're gonna make sure the moral responsibility lies with the perpetrators and those that are lashing out because of democracy and humanity not wanting to be exploited and abused like they have over the past 75 years. The global humanity. All right, that was my thought. Leo, did you?
No, absolutely. I absolutely, that's correct. I mean, the time is on our side, and the more time that passes, the colonial forces will further deteriorate, militarily speaking, economically speaking, morally speaking, in the eyes of the world. all of this is true. But Trotsky was a brilliant war commander.
I disagree. He was a great orator, but he was an okay commander.
Okay.
Oration was, I think,
he
his
wanted
master.
adventurism and opportunism. He was interested in adventurism and opportunism.
He wasn't a commander. He was a political officer. He went there to show his golden watch and get people. He was very good at motivating people. He wasn't really one of those.
He lost the war with Poland. I'm not sure that's a great battlefield success.
But sorry, I interrupted your train of thought.
Me? No. I was just basically agreeing with Billy. I mean, I prefaced the whole thing with just a small part of me, and he's still in that box. I mean, I'm not just,
No, you did. No, it was a good discussion, and again, that's what I like because it got me thinking, and I was able to articulate my response. So, what else, guys?
I want to. If I can lead you to a pivot to Asia, I read in Forbes magazine, meant for the billionaires and the industrialists of the world, that Janet Yellen is concerned about the workers of the world because of Chinese EV problems. And just to see how desperate these people are, Eldridge Colby was one of the authors of the National Security Policy, whatever, Obama's Pivot to Asia. This is him on a very short 19-second interview on C-SPAN.
Americans will become poorer and less free because the Chinese will gatekeep and dominate over 50% of global GDP. The Europeans and the Middle Easterners and the Latin Americans will fall into line, and they'll use their leverage to take the best jobs, the best companies, the best educational institutions, the world's currency, et cetera, and make them in China. Americans will become.
That's him, guys. And I have never seen a better case for psychiatric projection, because that's what they've been doing to the world, hence the fear.
Yeah. That's shrinking market. What he just described is literally shrinking market theory, which is actually what Hitler himself was espousing, because that was the big fear in the 1930s and 20s, was that as Eastern, particularly Soviet economies industrialized and were not dependent on European imports anymore, that would impoverish Western Europe. So that was the actual reason, the major economic and political reason Hitler gave for the needs to crush the Russian threat before shrinking market. I mean, that's verbatim what Colby would just said, that, the Chinese are going to steal our GDP, our precious GDP. They're going to steal all
and
of
the reserve currency. I love that he added that.
Yes, so they're just it's remarkable.
I was waiting for him to say precious bodily fluids next.
Yes, precious bodily fluids. Dr. Strangelove.
I would
the vampire squid. Go.
I would paraphrase him, and what he's saying is, this global economic system that the United States has created and pretends to champion with free markets and trade and competition. The United States is now going to lose that competition to China. So now we have to change the game, because we're going to lose the game that we created. And so we got to do something else. I mean, that's basically it. And of course they're going to lose, because China's a bigger country and they're run by way smarter people, and they organize themselves in a much better way than Western chaotic capitalist markets that are always, tweaked and rigged to benefit the wealthy elites to the detriment of the working class. So, I mean, China just joined the World Trade Center, the World Trade
WTO.
Trade Organization, in 2001. And, they already almost have twice as many patents as the United States on an annual basis, or maybe, maybe in total. But yeah, China's going to eat the U.S.'s lunch, and the U.S.'s share of global trade is going to get less and less, because China's going to get more and more. But there's a way to engage in global trade that's win-win, and you can have peace through mutual prosperity. But that's not what the U.S. wants. The U.S. wants control of the markets. They want control of the resources, and they want hegemony. And that's what they're not going to be able to have. And so now they might ask the working class to sacrifice in their struggle to maintain their hegemony, and that's going to be why our living standards might actually decrease. It's not because China is displacing us. it's because the U.S. is going to resist that violently, and they're going to ask us to suffer in that resistance. But
and let me just add one thing. It must be said, the neoliberalism narrative of privatization, innovation through private enterprises, and all of this, it's been a myth since the beginning, right? It's been a complete facade, an illusion, empty rhetoric, because the reality is that the bourgeois states have always subsidized private enterprises, like these big corporations, like from the British East India Company onwards, right? It was the colonial, like aristocratic, like state that boosted these corporations into their monopoly position, and then after they monopolize the sector of the market, then they say like, oh, we did it all on our own, and then they force developing economies, the former colonized economies, to privatize and privatize and privatize, so that they will never have competitive edge against the state subsidized capitalist countries.
The lie is, if you want to be like us, you have to privatize, and that's a fucking lie. It's a total lie.
Total lie from the
Gates was
beginning.
poor. He was in a garage. That's where he came up with the operating system. He's like you.
Yeah, and I should mention this book. This book by Korean economist called "Kicking Away the Ladder," which is precisely about this point. An unofficial history of capitalism, especially in Britain and the United States. It's about this particular thing of once these corporations get big and monopolized, they kick away the ladder so that other people cannot compete with them.
True. On industrial, I recently visited, I think Ian probably knows this, Rostat, and looking at the hard numbers, as in industrial capacity growing in Russia. And we're not just talking about military, we're talking about electronics, just household goods, food, all of these sectors. It's like 6 to 8%. It's like Chinese level numbers. That's Russia. And compared to that, if you look at concrete consumption or steel production, Russia is like most of the fucking world. I mean, we've recently seen that Baltimore bridge collapse, a horrific thing, costing lives, I think many immigrant workers' lives. But I just saw two sources mention that it might take 10 years and cost to millions to billions of dollars. In China, there was a similar thing, I think 2017, and there was a temporary bridge the next fucking day, and within 2 weeks, the whole thing was rebuilt. Or look at what Russia did after the Kerch Bridge attack. This is what an industrial economy is. It's very different. And what you described in kicking away the ladder, you have to. I mean, it works in Millet's Bible, but basically, you're never going to have that again ever in Russia or China. I think
there's a supreme irony in the way huge projects are built in the U.S. and like the bridge just 30 miles from where I live. It's that you take you take bribes and your buddy wins the bribe, or you take bids and the lowest figure, the guy that's going to cut the most corners, wins the contract. It's idiotic.
Who was that, Carlo? This famous astronauts had second thoughts when he was on top of a rocket that was built by the lowest bidder or something. I'm paraphrasing. Do you know that one?
No, I'm not aware of
that.
I don't remember which one it was. It was a little joke that I felt a bit uncomfort.
Of that billionaire who wanted to take his submersible to check out the Titanic.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Took his kitchen sink. But I think the big thing with Russia too is that for years they were building these relations with the West, and it did. Every policy has a couple of things. It has consequences, and it can have unintended consequences. So with Russia, they were just spending decades trying to build these good relations with the West, and that came with they were repeatedly undermining their own industry to facilitate Western investors coming in and building it. Why build a Russian factory when we can have a foreign business give us those cars or parts or furniture? Now that's all being replaced. It took the training wheels off.
And that's basically like what Poland is doing for a large part, no? Like getting all these American corporations to come in and build stuff and start businesses and start startups and
yes. At the same time, following the order of becoming the next Ukraine, Mr. Donald Tusk, who talks like this, and I can't stand him, says we are definitely in a pre-war era. We've seen nothing like this since 1945. That's coming out of his mouth, the new Polish prime minister. Jesus Christ.
I just want to go back to the bridge for a second on an entertainment note. And if you got 2,400 dock workers in Baltimore, the union, the major union, get no jobs, no work. If you want
major carport, I read, like one of the major carports in the United States, as in car importing ports.
Yes, and the prices are going to go up around here like crazy. But if you guys can ever get a hold of it, there's a American TV show. I don't know if you're aware of it, called The Wire.
Yeah,
I love The Wire.
And you do. And the second season of that focuses on Frank Sabatka, who's a union leader, and that's a real. I mean, and our viewers should watch it too, because that's a very kind of personal and up close view of what goes on in the Baltimore and all the unions. My daughter is involved in union work. She used to be with a partner in a transportation union. A transportation firm that represented many transportation unions, and now she's with the United Auto Workers. So it's like it's such a great script. Series. Maybe.
Do you know why it's so good? Because all the contemporary cop shows are unlike it. There's white and there's black. There's good and evil. That one was the last show, and I really enjoyed it, where it was pretty much everybody was gray. Like realistic. Very good show.
Yeah, it showed the system. It was the focus was the system. David, what's his name? The writer famously said, the star of the show, the main character, is the city itself. And it's the entire system that connects the drug dealers on the streets to like City Hall and the politicians, with the media in between and the cops. Like it's the whole systemic like view of capitalism, basically.
Yes.
So glad I'm not the only one who watched that. It's like 80s or something. It's old, isn't it?
No, 90s. No, 90s. Early 2000s. No, late 90s or early 2000s. Yeah. And speaking of the economics, like we don't get shows like that anymore, because in the first, when TV series first became a thing, the first generation TV series had a lot more possibility. They had all this funding, and they had they could, like, producers, writers could tell a cohesive story. And then capitalism catches up, and the funding came in, and all of these shows. I mean, I've written a lot about, because I used to work in Hollywood, just the economics of like what the reason why all these series start off strong, right? And they like by the middle or so they lose steam, and the writers like start just like making up nonsense that doesn't even make sense. And it's just all economics. Like they run out of funding. You produce an amazing pilot show that gets the investment, that gets the funding, and then after that, like that's a one-time deal. And then by half of the series, it's all spent like on cocaine or whatever takeout, and then they run out of steam, and the ending is just like some total like you don't need to watch the last 3 episodes, right? Anyway, but the entire industry is like that as well. Like the macro replicates the dynamics, the process of the micro, right? Like all of Hollywood is falling apart because of basically dynamics like that.
And it's true. And back in the first generation of TV, right after the McCarthy era, you could see plays by Clifford Odets, Patty Chayefsky. I mean, Dalton Trumbo was blacklisted, but under different names, he got things produced on television and in the movies. So there was there. I mean, Leo's right. The TV was actually very good back in the early 50s, mid 50s. There's a lot of bad stuff, but there was some meaningful, sincere, good material.
Yeah, as in today, in contrast, we get the American version of the free body problem that keeps everything bad about China, but all the good stuff is Europe. That's basically the recipe for the American version of the three body problem.
Yes.
So ridiculous.
Yeah. Now the CIA sits in on every script that involves the Middle East or anything controversial.
Can you guys hear me? I got a notification that my mic went out, and I changed mics, and then I changed back to the first mic. So my first mic's okay.
Loud and clear.
Okay. So tell Spaz he needs to. I'm just teasing.
Yes, he's in here. He's in here.
I can hear him in the back. I don't really have I don't have news. I just had a comment. I mean, I wanted to talk more about Leo's initial comment. You know, he was talking about Ha-Joon Chang. Ha-Joon Chang is one of the most respected developmental economists in the world. I mean, he works, you know, he's affiliated with so many universities in the United States and around the world. And Carlo has some back problem. His back went out again. He's struggling. So we send him our sympathy. But what was I going to say about Haji? Okay, well, basically the neoliberalism. I liked what Leo was saying about the lies of neoliberalism, and I just wanted to kind of, you know, restate that. You know, the U.S. got, you know, powerful by using tariffs, by protecting their national industries, our own industries. And that's how the Britain got powerful too. So we developed by using protective, not free market approaches. And then, you know, but the neoliberalism, once we are developed and we're the biggest, most powerful economy in the planet, well, we want everyone else to be free market so we can exploit you. Bingo. And then a government refuses because they're smart and they care about their people. We overthrow them. And I've plugged this documentary before, but it's called Life and Debt. It's about Jamaica. It's about how the government of Jamaica did not want to open up its economy to free market policies. And so we rigged an election there, and we got the government out of power. We put in a government that was going to approve these free market policies, and it destroyed all of their domestic production. So, you know, all the agriculture that they produced there, all the dairy products they produced there. Once the U.S. flooded their market with our products, their domestic, you know, industries collapsed. And then they had all these unemployed people that we moved to Nike, the Nike sweatshops. So all the people went to the Nike sweatshops. And, you know, that's just kind of a nutshell, you know, example of how free trade is manipulated. And, you know, always on the internet, we talk to these ridiculous libertarians and conservatives who say that, you know, free market policies are what made the U.S. strong. You know, that's the answer. The answer is free market. The problem is government. The answer is free markets. The people, they are really, really, you know, detached from objective economic reality. You know.
Hello, Spaz.
Yeah, the word, the word imperialism has nothing. It's not in their vocabulary.
No. Exactly. Just look up the biographies and the fortunes of Carnegie or DuPont or Rockefeller. It's all monopoly and protectionism. Completely right. Mm-hmm. I wanted to transition to one last story, but I'm not sure that Billy Bob's. You might have some.
I'm not sure Spaz will let us.
Oh yes, Spaz is.
He's here to listen. He's
excitable. Hello, Spaz. Slug is relaxed in the background at the moment. I won't bother her. But there's one other empire, not empire, but it used to be an empire that is extremely parasitic, and that is Mr. Emmanuel Macron's Petit France, who got kicked out, one country outside of the other from France. So no uranium, no gold, all of that.
From Africa.
And now, from Africa, I'm sorry about that. Yes. By the way, the next one is Senegal. Thank goodness for the new prime minister. I mean, one of his first deeds was, it's time for you to get out and for us to revisit all cooperation with France. Good fucking guy. And he flew over to Latin America, to your region, to meet Lula, who, you know, I was always of two minds with Lula, but I don't know what the hell to do with this. All of the headlines were about bromance and wedding, and he's sort of owning it, saying, we love Brazil. Brazil loves Lula. And all of this is about agreement about some, I don't know, not a billion, but a couple of million euros into clean green stuff, and has to do with the Amazon. Oh, Leo dropped out. I hope he'll be back. I don't believe it for a second. So there has to be economics in the background. And if, you know, we're not going to know. They launched a submarine, basically, a diesel submarine. And the headlines were, they don't agree on Ukraine, but they can still get along, or something like that. That's the message. But they don't agree on Ukraine. They don't actually agree on submarines because Lula wants to have nuclear-powered submarines made in Brazil, and Macron doesn't want to export that sensitive technology. He's concerned about proliferation. And the third one is the EU-Mercosur deal. And that's what got me thinking when Billy Bob mentioned, these free trade deals and laissez-faire. I mean, Milei should look at Mexico because you remember NAFTA? Of course, now there's drugs and violence because NAFTA made the local huge agriculture sector basically impoverished them. And if this deal that is in question, not really good for anyone, including European farmers, goes through, then something like that might happen to Brazil, whose main industry is food. The second one is oil refining, even though they don't have oil. But look at a cursory glance of the main deposits that I think Macron is thinking about that Brazil has. They have a lot of gold. They had a lot of, I think, a main ingredient in maybe phosphate, a main ingredient in fertilizers. Okay, and obviously iron ore, tin. Stuff like that, but I think that's what he's aiming for because he's been kicked out of one place and he wants to go into another. But I understand from his perspective this is in character. I don't understand Lula in this.
Let's hope Lula is setting some kind of a trap for him.
Amen to that.
I want to briefly add that Lula has a large stake in Haiti. I don't think that's a critical factor, but it should be mentioned. And I just want to talk about Faye in Senegal. Look, I was one of the initial supporters of Ruto in Kenya, and he's turned out to be quite the disappointment. And I'm going to hold back on Faye not to get burned again. He's till he proves he's another Traore, and then we can talk. I just want to throw that in.
So
Lula,
you're right. Kind of is a little bit of a disappointment. But I mean, you would like Lula to be more forceful in supporting Russia and China. But so he's kind of like Erdogan, he's kind of like Modi, but I think he's a little better than those guys. But no, he's got no interest in taking a side, right? He's gonna do what's in the best interest of Brazil. He's gonna play both sides. He does not want to be seen as all in. He wants to be seen as the best friend of everybody. And that's kind of what that picture looks like. I mean, he's the best friends with the West. And that kind of bothers us, but you understand where he's coming from. I mean, he's in the Western Hemisphere and he's got to maintain. It's not going to benefit Brazil if he just says, fuck you, to the US, which we would like him to do, but he's not going to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it is Latin America, so there's a founding BRICS country, but Russia and China are very far away. That's just the reality that Lula unfortunately has to take into account.
And there's been huge demonstrations in support of Bolsonaro and Bolsonaroists.
Yeah, he's got domestic issues to worry about, and he can't expose himself to those fascists, the fascistas that the U.S. loves.
And there's a large evangelical population in Brazil.
Yeah,
they're always a nuisance.
They have great steakhouses. Man, it's delicious.
Brazil. I don't know. I wish to read maybe in 5 years' time what was the actual substance of this meeting because I couldn't find it. But we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, it says it all in the photos. I mean, he's just saying, "Look, I love the West. Let's be friends. Let's move forward together." And yeah, that's good. That's a good sentiment. I mean, the West is not going to do that though. They're going to force people to take sides if they can, and they're going to, we'll see. We'll see if they're going to push it to, the ball's in their court. Like I was saying earlier, are they going to expand? Are they going to escalate? Is it going to be, is France going to send troops? Is that going to be the gateway?
I can answer that. Definitely no.
That they would not shoot their shot, right? It's hard to believe they're not going to shoot their shot, make some kind of effort. And that includes China, some kind of huge escalation with China. We hope they don't. It's foolish. It's bad for the planet, bad for humanity, but they don't care about those things. They care about their own wealth and power.
Stupid.
We didn't talk about Israel at all today.
Yeah, well,
we can because we have time. We got another 10 minutes.
Let's hear your thoughts.
Yeah, my thought is fuck Israel.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Full stop.
They're not stopping, even though now the ICJ has ruled them to open up, the gates of Rafah and get the aid in. It's obvious they're not stopping. It's disgusting. That's what comes to mind.
I think it's dawning on them.
They take their own grave at the same time. Go on, Billy.
Yeah, no, I think it's dawning on them. They don't have a military option. Like they don't have a military option. So I think that their lack of success, like Justin was saying on Tuesday, their lack of success is going to bring them to some kind of negotiation. Again, I'm optimistic on all these fronts. It's horrific what they have done so far, but that's not something that's going to benefit them long term. It's not going to sustain their blight on that geographical area in the long term. So, like you said, they're hastening their own demise. I'll
say this. Apparently, according to
Biden, resolution was a joke. But go ahead.
Absolutely. According to Biden, there's a new plan in the works which will get Israel full recognition from all the Arab states. And this came out the same day as there was like the fourth day in a row, like huge protest against the government in Jordan. Sisi in Egypt is looking for more military assistance from the West. These there's just no realistic possibility now of full acceptance of Israel into the Arab world. I'm going to call it, Joe Biden. That's a bluff. That is a bad one.
I like your French accent. No, I agree. Like these compradors have to be very careful because their people are angry and they're not happy with what's going on in Palestine. They're not happy with their governments, enabling the genocide there. And so they got to be very, very careful. And the U.S. has to be aware of that. Like, all the wealth that we've invested and effort we've invested in propping up these governments that oppose the interests of their people, they could fall. So, I mean, I hope that's true.
I think most of this is the Western media loves the term Potemkin villages, even though it's just which is actually just fake news. Is the idea that when Catherine the Great visited Crimea right after it joined the Russian Empire, is that her advisors would scheme and build fake villages for her. It's a total urban legend. It's British propaganda, but still. And it's actually a projection because we love the Potemkin village concept in Western countries. And I think this is essentially what Biden is doing because, the Palestine issue hurts him more than it hurts Republicans because, there are a lot more because the thing is Biden being pro-Israel will not make pro-Trump Republicans vote for him. And being against Palestine will not dissuade most Republicans from voting for Trump. So it's just such a one-sided issue that almost exclusively hurts Biden. And also Trump has the benefit of not being in power, so he can be that. So that's Trump's biggest
advantage. If I was there, I would solve it. It would be solved.
He can say that on everything. If I was president, I would have solved the Ukraine issue yesterday.
We wouldn't have these problems.
Yes. So he can look like a genius. It also doesn't help when Biden is, in fact, an idiot. So it's actually not difficult or implausible for Trump to say he could handle it better. It's because it's such a low bar to get over. And so I think when Biden tries to portray himself, or I should say his handlers try to portray him as this master negotiator, I mean, it's
Jesus.
Airdropping a sandwich into Gaza, just to show what a humanitarian is.
Here's the quote from when he got elected. Finally, the foreign policy adults are in charge. That was the quote. It's amazing. I wanted to add two more names to the list that Carlo hates all three. Number one was Trump, who said, you kind of got to wrap this Rafah thing up. You're losing a lot of support. That was one. Cadence Owens is the other one who had to leave the Zionist boat, right? And the third is Alex Jones. These guys had to leave the Zionist boat. That's how bad it's got. And you know the US had to dust off to get some support, and it failed for Biden. Two other war criminals, Obama and Clinton, going on stage, and he still got booed off that fucking stage. Amazing.
Alex Jones. Oh my God.
Alex Jones had to disavow what Israel is doing. I know,
but that guy's a con man. And I've watched this documentary about the families at Sandy Hook that sued him. And if you want to see a despicable human being, I'm laying here watching the thing for the second time, going, what terms can I use to grasp the evil, the psychopathy of this
Yeah.
fat prick.
And
I
he
mean,
couldn't
can't
take.
come up with anything
But that's the
evil
point.
enough. He is
He
just
couldn't take what Israel is doing. Isn't that amazing?
yeah. Well, he's an opportunist.
Yeah.
He sees what side of the bread the butter's on, and he's going to go for that.
I don't.
He
It's
wants
just-
to sell more of
I'm
his
just
stuff.
shocked that he has such a big wide audience. Like, why is he so popular? Like, he doesn't really. He's just so dumb, and I don't. I wish he wasn't so popular.
Well, yeah, because they're ninnies. I tell everybody.
No, I know.
The U.S.
Paulie, it
population
is not
are
easy
ninnies.
to be a superpower. I definitely empathize with the people that are trying to maintain this collapsing, this huge collapsing structure. It is not easy at all. So that's definitely true. Ian, you were going to say something when I
Jackson Hinkle, the big conservative, kind of right wing guy.
What?
He's
He's
pro Russia. Is he?
Well,
I don't read him closely.
He's part of this whole MAGA communism thing, which I found interesting. But
I see. I don't read him closely because
he's socially conservative, like in the identitarian way. He's right wing, but he's socially conservative. Like he's for the traditional family, and he's probably a little bit homophobic, and stuff like that. But like in terms of economics, he is, or purportedly, opportunistically perhaps, says that he's communist.
Yeah, go ahead.
Last weekend, like right after, and it's kind of hard to tell what did he do to piss off people, but right after the Crocus City, it coincided with the Crocus City attack, but correlation doesn't equal causation. But he did get banned off a whole bunch of platforms. It started at Instagram, but it looks orchestrated. A whole bunch of platforms, streaming platforms, and crowdfunding platforms booted him all at once.
I might know. He had a 1-hour interview in English with Maria Zakharova, which is part of it. And our beloved...
He's also pro-Palestine too, so there's a number of things that might have...
Our beloved or behated Alex Jones did all the same, or maybe 40 minutes with Solovyov, the firebrand Russian TV presenter. So I'm wondering when they're going to yank him from wherever he is. But yeah, he talked with the enemy.
Alex Jones has been yanked from almost all the places he can be yanked. I mean, he even has a Yandex Zen account.
He does?
Yes. InfoWars on the Yandex Zen, which is very funny.
I have no idea. But...
It's very funny. There's a whole bunch of right-wing American channels on Russian platforms, which is very funny to me. But if you get banned off of American platforms, you can go to Russia for your free speech.
That's a very interesting point, Ian. That is so true. These liberal values, that's we pretend to embrace these liberal values, and that's what binds the West together is our love of these liberal values and our championing of them, and it's such a fucking lie. Such a fucking lie.
I'm gonna quote.
I've mentioned this. My Medium account was killed for no given reason a couple of months ago. Anyway,
of course it was.
I mean, it's all in the context of probably a greater escalation in hostilities and a conflict, and maybe even declarations of war, and they have to prepare the media battle space before they do that. And that could be what's going on.
I even deleted my Ukraine article.
And
they deleted before this happened, like several months before. I was like, okay, that may be a little bit too sensitive. I'm going to delete that SMO essay about the SMO because I live in Germany and I'm going to be a little bit careful. And then that didn't help. I mean, there was nothing on there that was even remotely stepping on anybody's toes, really. Even I had just some factual stuff.
And,
but anyway.
We jump to conspiracy conclusions, and it could be a totally different reason, but definitely.
No, it's like my account violated the rules of Medium.
Yeah. I'm going to say this. I mean, I wanted to discuss a little bit about Europe, but, fuck the EU, as Nuland likes to say. I'm just going to say this. We have gotten to the phase, which is another side effect of this SMO getting into high gear and this thing collapsing, and meaning Project Ukraine. Now there's enemies everywhere. They're under your pillow. Russian influence, Russian cyber hacks. There's apparently the Czechs unearthed these people who were paying money to European Parliament members. It's everywhere, and that's unfortunately going to be very hard for if you just want to write an article, if you just want to have a show like this, if you want to talk about Russia. We're looking at a very, very censored end game. That's all. Europe is going down this thing like crazy. I don't know. I think Germany's always been kind of rough, but I think it's going to get worse.
So yeah, we can. I mean, that's what I definitely expect. I mean, as hostilities increase and as the struggle becomes more acute, the resistance to us and our resistance is gonna increase. I would also say that Hinkle is 23 or 24,
He's
and I think some of his social conservatism is backwards. I would say I don't agree with him on certain things he says and takes he makes. Yeah, even with regards to race, like some really just stupid commentary on race and sexuality. But he's fucking 24, and I cut him a lot of slack, and he is he's gonna improve, I hope. So no, 24-year-olds, believe me, if you guys knew me at 24, I mean, I would want some slack to be cut for myself.
Well,
and he's one of the biggest, if not the biggest,
he's got a huge audience. He's got a huge audience.
Right. That's the point. Go ahead, Ian.
I was going to say left, I would say more so than conservatives, leftists can be guilty of too much gatekeeping.
Oh, yeah.
To the movement's own detriment. A lot of people,
absolutely,
it's like where they treat every single issue as like a loyalty test. If you don't agree with me on, every single thing, then you're not a real leftist. Karl Marx would be like
splinter. That's what we do.
Yes.
I question Hinkle's sincerity, because he's publicly stated his intent was to become famous. I didn't use that word, but he used a word like that.
Clout.
That's it.
Yeah.
To have clout.
Oh,
and
but
I don't want
Zoomer.
I don't want 24-year-olds to have clout.
What I like is that they
don't have wisdom.
He had a chat, which I can only dream of, with Maria Zakharova. He had a chat with Lavrov. He gave him this gift of an article when the Russians and the Soviet and the US soldiers met somewhere, and the article in the New York Times, he did that. He also, I'm always thinking about the dissident artist Ai Weiwei, but not him, a very famous Chinese thinker. He had a big conversation with him, and I can only, praise him for that. But
I watched that one.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on race. He can be a bit backwards, but think of him as he's a Russian communist or an Eastern European communist. Famously, they are, some mostly Orthodox and religious, and they also are family-centered. So that's why in USA that would be considered, I think, conservative. You just have to be aware that's not the world. That's what I wanted to say on Jackson Hinkle. But I had one last quote based on these big liberal values that we talk about here in the EU and you in the US. I read this article in the Financial Times by Martin Wolf, a dictatorship expert, idiot Brit. And he talked about fascism and the return of fascism, and it's changed shape because it's basically Orban and Le Pen, and these people are the fascists. But this is one verbatim quote. The fascism in Germany or Italy in the 19th, 20s, and 30s does not now exist, except perhaps in Russia. That's Martin Wolf for you. That's the liberal values.
That's
absurd.
The talking points of the fake left, the Democrats. If you take the Democrats as the left, that's their talking points. And other actual existing socialists that hate, or the people the socialists, they call themselves socialists, but they hate actually existing socialism. They're all about it's the authoritarians. China's an authoritarian. We oppose them. Russia's an authoritarian. We oppose them. And, U.S. imperialism, I mean, it's liberal. It's better than those two. So they just side with the imperialists.
All the previous.
I want to thank Leo for joining us. But go ahead,
sorry. Dan. I just wanted to say all the previous wars, we know they were bad and the CIA and all that. But this one's real, and it's for the good of the world.
They get fooled every fucking time.
Yep.
These fake Western leftists.
I'm one
of those gatekeepers. Like, if you don't support Stalin, if you don't support China today, you're not on the left.
Fuck you.
I have one quote I wanna get in, and also I commiserate with Leo because it's always a drag to be dissed by an algorithm. You know what I mean? And that's what all it is. and I've been there, done. It's happened to me. The quotes from the fascist American fascist poet Ezra Pound, and he said that Jesus would have been a great philosopher, but he died too young. So I'll only leave you to that.
Who was Ukrainian? I'll leave you with that. That's amazing.
All right.
Okay.
On that great note, we will pick it up next week, Tuesday, episode 67. Thank you very much for watching. Leo, thanks for coming. My co-hosts, thank you so much. See you next time.
All right.